Hello. Um,
I
Hey, Basil. Hello also to those of you watching. My name is Kelly Baker Josephs, and this is the third in a series of conversations with Caribbean playwrights, all of who have been. I am the founder and editor of Manchineel Seagrape, which is dedicated to publishing open access Caribbean plays. And I am here with Basil Dawkins today to discuss his play Champagne and Sky Juice. And this, as I said, is a part of a series of conversations, the third in that series, that we're having with playwrights that have published in Manchineel and Seagrape. And we would like to thank the Caribbean Digital Scholarship Collective, the Mellon Foundation, and the University of Miami for its support for this series. And thank you again, Basil, for making time in your very busy day in the
Yes,
middle of
my
the
pleasure,
day.
Kelly. My pleasure.
So we're going to discuss Champagne and Sky Juice and also just theater in general. Um, and let me say a little bit about Champagne and Sky Juice. This is your fourth play as I have it. According to the introduction that Mervyn Morris wrote, he said it's your fourth play, performed at the Barn Theater in Kingston, first in 1986, is what I have here. And the setting of the play is 1980, which is during the big election between Michael Manley, Edward
And Edward
Seaga,
Seaga.
and that shift. And so the play opens in February when the elections are called, and it runs through all of 1980. But it's all set just in a living room, a middle class living room, and it's what's called a two-hander. So there's a husband, Greg, and wife, Beverly. The former Greg is a JLP supporter, and Beverly is a PNP supporter. And as the play goes along, that's the central conflict, but we find that there are many other things that are related to that. So the social and the political are intertwined, and the two protagonists rise and fall, sometimes inversely, both in social contexts and domestic contexts. So that's the overview.
That's it.
Very
That's a
quick.
good overview. As good as I could do.
Thank you. So could you tell us a little bit about what motivated you, inspired you, as much as you can remember, to write this play?
I recall that it was a very heady time back in the 1980s. That's when like political violence peaked,
Hmm.
PNP versus JLP. And it was a very unsettling time. In context, there was a strong view that Michael Manley, who was the reigning prime minister, was in fact taking us into communism. That was a
Hmm.
fear, and his friendship with Castro of Cuba and his touting of a non-aligned movement of the third world and the need for a South-South collaboration instead of South-North. All of that made Big Brother up north very unsettled. In fact, as a result of which his opposition party, the Jamaica Labour Party, tried and was aligned either, I don't know if it was deliberate or it was just out of default, that they were seen as pro-USA, pro-imperialism, and therefore there was this big clash between the PNP Michael Manley, the JLP Edward Seaga, and the people, the division and the divide ripped right through the society
Yes.
and caused a lot of discontent, violence, and all kinds of antisocial behavior surrounding from the announcement of the elections right through to the holding of the elections, right through to when the government changed, when Michael Manley was voted out.
Yeah, and the play
So
takes
that's
us
the
way back there.
context. And I was inspired. I thought that there was enough material to capture in reality, contemporaneously, what exactly was happening. So for that slice of life of the play, it's there's no there was nothing in there that was really imagined. It was kind of like just recording in a dramatic way what
Okay.
exactly happened and actually focusing it on a family to make it doable,
Hmm. Yes.
scalable. Um, but it essentially captured most of what was going on at the time.
Yeah, that's true. Can you remember some of the context of the first performance at Barn Theater?
It opened like any ordinary play, and it ran. It was popular. People relate to it mostly because I'd used the principal actors that existed in Jamaica at the time. It was Leonie Forbes and Charles Hyatt, and it was directed by a formidable director, Lloyd Record. And
Hmm.
so it had some kind of power behind it, not because of me, in spite of me. Um, I am always feeling that I'm the weak link in a production process, and therefore, what I should do, if I ended up writing a good play, it's like having a Mercedes Benz, but you certainly can't put kerosene oil to run it if you want maximum performance. So it's what I did. I got the best that was available, and
Hmm.
they did very well, and it brought out the audiences. Um, Somewhere in the down the road of the run, I ran into a little spot of bother because a journalist who was looking at the sociocultural structure of Jamaica in the post-election period. I think he came from the Chicago Tribune, and
Hmm.
he came to do a piece on Jamaica, and he made more than generous allusions to the play, which actually piqued other interest into the play. I never knew about the writing until I suddenly noticed just about when we were supposed to be closing, that would be after 100 performances or so. Suddenly the audience just jumped again and we were having full house and I could explain it. And when I asked, they said it had to do with a review that was done by some journalists here based on what the journalists in the
Okay.
Chicago Tribune said, and the government was very hurt or feeling bad about it. So they made their own inquiry to see, I guess, if I should be whatever they felt that should have happened to me. But as it turned out, all that happened was that we did very well again after that. And in a kind of way, although I was watchful, I was I was happy that it happened because it did extend the run substantially.
Oh. Was this your like first big play? It's your fourth play, but
It
do
was
you feel like it was the
not maybe to the extent that it opened up the world for me.
mm,
That's when I really started touring, and
mm,
the play started to do well overseas. Where where Caribbean people and particularly Jamaicans were settled, so we did well in Miami and New York and right up the eastern seacoast and Toronto and where we did not go ourselves, the script was requested to be done by other groups in the
oh,
Caribbean and elsewhere. So in a way, yes, I would say that has to be seen as maybe the important piece that kind of pivoted me into what must have forced me to start seeing myself now as a playwright, and I should start taking myself a little more seriously.
I didn't know that it had gone abroad. So was that across the 80s or did it stretch into later times? How was the trade?
It
Play?
was just about when there was the end of the run here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Promoters seem to have had a particular interest in the work. I don't think it was only from the fact of the subject matter. I think it also had to do with the fact that entrepreneurial promoters overseas saw that they were getting top actors with a with and just having to pay for minimal seating on a plane and hotel and so on
Yeah.
and so forth because there were only two
Two
actors.
actors, yeah.
So it was a very small touring party.
That makes sense, yes. So the practicalities also helped it travel
It
and
did. It did. It did.
that's interesting. Eugene Williams was so he was the one who suggested that of all your plays, this might be the one that best works on the page. Can you tell us a little bit about what your relationship is to a play after you've written it on the page, right? What happens after that
Okay,
in general?
I am first artist, creative, the creative mind behind the work, getting it on the page. And it goes through the whole of heartaches that writers go through and the rewriting and the rejection and what seemed good and workable today. A week after you read it again and it's not sounding as hot as you thought it had. And all of that. Usually that takes a long period. I've shortened that time now. I don't spend as long. And then back in those days too, I also had a corporate job. I was the
Mhm.
assistant vice president. So I had, but I've long given up corporate. So things don't have to be as stretched out as they used to. So I would write for a long time and
What's a long time? So,
um then a long time would have been a year
okay.
or more than a year, maybe
Hmm.
two, even up to 2 years. Now everything has to happen within a year because we have to open on the 27th of December every year, right? Yeah.
Oh.
So everything is now compressed. But then I have more freedom of time and so on. But I would struggle with a play, making sure that I'm satisfied with it. And
Hmm.
when I'm satisfied with it, the most important thing for me is to select a competent director. Because I think next to you writing a play, the most important decision you make as a playwright, if you have the ability to be producing your own play, is who you select as your director.
Mm.
Now, once I hand over my script to a director, the artist part, the creative part of me takes second place and I now become the producer. So I'm
Okay.
now the business person. So anything artistic, anything creative, it's the director and his cast and his supporting personnel. I will just be there facilitating and enabling the production overall, making sure that bottoms are in that seat when it opens. Okay, making sure that bills are paid and so on and so forth. I am only accessible to the cast and the director once I've handed over the script, only to the extent that they require me to be there to clear up anything that's naughty when there are different interpretations and they want to know writer's intention and so on and so forth. And but basically the play is handed over to the director, once the play opens and the director is gone and the play is handed over to the stage manager, I will like quality control from time to time. But I once a play opens, unless I'm forced to or required by protocol to sit with distinguished patrons or you know, I hardly I'm in there watching a play. So I will see a play, for example, when we go on
Yes.
tours, like the first performance in a new venue, just
Hmm.
to make sure that things are all right. But by and large, it's business once the play is written and handed over to a director.
Well, that's fascinating. So it's almost like the two sides of your brain, right? You
Indeed,
have
yes,
the
yes.
writing and then you shut it off and you become producer.
I don't know if I shut it
Well,
off,
or
but
close the
even
door
if it's
a bit.
open, I'm
Yeah.
no longer focusing on that play.
Hmm.
Maybe what I'm doing after that is thinking about the next play to be opened, which
Okay.
is, although it seemed far that it's another December 27th, it comes along quite quickly.
Quickly,
You
yeah.
know, so you have to be disciplined and be on your game so that you still are able to not be celebrating too much, but getting
Mhm.
ready to do another production to open on the 27th of the following December.
I do want to come back to that because the 27th of December is coming up this year.
Yes,
But
yes,
I
yes.
want to step back to champagne and sky juice for a little bit and ask you,
Certainly.
especially now that I know that it did travel to other places, although you said it was other places with a large Jamaican community or Caribbean
Yeah, it was
community.
primarily, remember too that Kelly, that at the time, quite a number of persons had migrated from Jamaica
Yeah.
out of perceptions of self-preservation or avoiding communism or whatever was the pretext. There was a
Mhm.
massive relocation.
Uh-oh. We have, oh, this is the first time this has happened. Let's see.
There
Uh,
was,
there you
and
go.
there was an interest in that play because of the subject matter.
Okay. We somehow
Yeah.
we had a little blip there.
So
Yeah.
I say, you didn't miss much. I don't
No,
think.
you came in smoothly, right where you needed to.
Okay.
So, I was wondering because this, so we're publishing it. It's open access. It can be read, but we're hoping by people in schools, but read by anyone. Do you think that there needs to be context that the play doesn't bring with it, or how did you feel? Was there anything that needed to be said when it traveled, or anything like that to contextualize the play itself, or anything that needs to be changed in the design or the setting?
Nothing in fact, we were able to slavishly stick to the original concept and nothing needed explanation. Maybe one or two concepts that may have been misinterpreted if Jamaicans, we have an attitude and we say things in a particular way, and sometimes it's we infringe upon other words and put our own meaning to it. But, because of your interview, I reread the script recently and it seemed to have stood up quite well.
It
And
does.
we never found that people never related to the piece when we toured. They related to it emotionally and they related to it as, in fact, there goes I, but that was me, that kind of thing. So it's been fairly stable across the performing stages of the world.
Cool. I think also because it's a large part of it is that domestic conflict, right? So
Absolutely.
so you have the setting of, yes, the political moment, but there's also very much the gender conflict between
Yes,
Greg
definitely.
and Bev.
Definitely.
In the introduction, Reverend Morris writes that the play is often winking at gender stereotypes. So I think that there's a lot that goes on in how the two are managing their home life, right?
Yeah, and there's a kind of Jamaicanness in the attitude and our relation to how we treat our women
Hmm.
back then. I think things have changed substantially because our women are not so forgiving and docile as back in those days, and where men felt that whether they contributed or not, they were king. And then I particularly made sure, without caricaturing, to bring out those dynamics, to
Between the two.
show that, because although we're dealing with a kind of socio-political play, I wanted to deal with the sociopolitics of the domestic setup, and therefore to also be able to point to my fellow men that there's a
Yeah.
there's a way in which we treat our women that can see improvement, and
Mm,
an encouragement on my part without being combative, that they look at how they treat the people who they bring closest to them, their women.
amazing.
So that was there.
Yes. And there are a lot of funny moments too that where we know we're
Absolutely.
not necessarily laughing with Greg. Sometimes we might be laughing at
That we
Greg.
catch him. Yeah.
But what do you think is the role of humor in Caribbean dramas, particularly Jamaican dramas?
Well, from my own understanding and from watching other plays and seeing what's been successful and what's not successful over the years, I have formed the conclusion that we have to mix the comedy with the tragedy. It's maybe for academic purposes, you will want to define something as a tragedy or a drama or a comedy, but I think life represents a mixture of comedy in the midst of tragedy, a mixture of tragedy in the midst of comedy. And in fact, for my own survival, I have always found that if you want to put meaningful messages out there without sounding preachy, you have to treat that part of your text as the medicine, but the comedy is the sugar that's going to make it go down and stay down. So you'll find that I will endeavor to mix very lavishly comedy even into my dramas so that it does not come across as attacking, and it does not come across as my holding a position and hitting over the head the people who do not hold that position. And that I find that comedy will make the work digestible to all kinds of audiences, and that's very important for me.
And especially if you're expecting them to come back
Yes,
every
indeed.
December. Yes.
Yeah.
You've written a lot of plays. Do
Yeah.
you know how many?
I'm not sure. I know it's over 40 that's been written and produced.
And for okay.
And produced. Yeah,
You have some that are just
it
sitting in
may
a
be
drawer
near
that
50, but it's definitely over 40 last time I checked.
wow. And you have given those to the National Library. Do I remember that correctly? You have an archive.
Yeah, I did. It's really a requirement, that people don't know. Once you do a creative piece, once you write something and so on, you really ought to deposit a copy with the National Library. Um, which only makes for good sense too, because for posterity purposes and for purposes of study and so on, that
Mhm.
people will know where to source the material when, if and when they find that they need to lean on something that's written
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. Do you know of any other playwrights who have done that? I don't, it
I'm
was a
sure
big
that
deal
other,
when you did it.
yeah, it was because I
Yeah.
think they use it as an opportunity to encourage others too,
To
as
do.
well. I think people have softened up. Um, we have a big fear in our society where we feel that people will thief our things and so on and so forth. So we kind of very cagey with it. I have I've never shared that view. Even if you take my play and you try to, there was a time when somebody did was it that was it Champagne and Sky Juice? I think it was in England. And I was he did it without permission, and the Arts Council came down heavily on him, and I was had a successful run in London, and I got a substantial sum. It turned out to be quite lucrative for me. I wish others would do that, and I can't. It's an easy way to make a good book.
That's interesting. Could you tell us, let's see, I have three questions left and I want to ask all of them. Let me see if
You,
I can get which ones I can get in. You've been writing, producing since 1980, or about roundabout,
yeah, about
is
that.
what I have from your bio.
Yes. Mhm.
How has the theater scene changed? Has it changed? What have you noticed differently? Not just, well, you have talked about some things that you've changed, but in terms of the scene overall.
Generally speaking, a lots of things have changed. There was a time when theater was not a mass sport. It was for the privileged and the
Oh,
very middle class, but it has been democratized somewhat, I think, to a large part. Trevor Rohn, who started to write in a relatable way. The national pantomime had its role, but I think significantly is the role that the Jamaica Festival has had
oh,
on the evolution and the development of the arts throughout the schools and throughout the whole of the society. And the fact that they have this annual competition where schools and so on vie, it makes for some amount of seriousness and some amount of search to find opportunities. I find that you will find a lot of theater graduates and so on working in the hotel industry and so on and so forth. So, in a way, it has changed. We find a lot of people now using the basic training of theater and switching over to the digital world and using facilities and platforms such as YouTube and so on to be doing creative things. Uh, you find too that while there's a lot of talent and there's the opportunity that I would like to see blossom where there's a greater interaction and marriage between like the tourism industry and Kingston and the parishes as a creative place where people can, like how we go to Broadway, if people could come to Kingston to see fine theater because the talent is here. However, we're still lacking in infrastructure so that we 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 can't find, for example, built to purpose theaters
yes.
that will give the full expansion so that we could, for example, match any Broadway production. It's not that we don't have the talent and skills, but we don't have the infrastructure. You know, one of my actors came to me one time when we were in, I think in LA, and said Mr. Dawkins, there are more lights in this school theater than there is in all of Jamaica. When are we going to get here, you know? And I would, for example, like to see too that there are performance spaces in every parish in the
Mm,
country because the talent does not only abound
Kingston.
in Kingston. In fact, there's a whole lot of talent out in the rural areas. And they are talented without even knowing that they are talented because that it's raw and natural.
And what are you working on? I'm just doing a jump.
Yeah.
There's so much there, and we didn't get to talk about Barn Theatre, but we're at almost 1:30. I want to hear about this play that you're in rehearsals for December
A
27th.
Rose of Sharon is the
Mhm.
name of the new play that opens December 27th at the Little Theater. And basically, the story is about a deportee who was sent out from the US by Donald Trump and his ICE operatives. He comes to Jamaica, but he has no connection that he's aware of in Jamaica. So he's here, he has nobody, he hits the streets, but the underworld in Kingston, they seem as valuable because he speaks with an American accent, and that is invaluable when it comes to the scammers trying to get people to to take people's wealth from people in the States. So he's constantly harassed, constantly beaten, has nobody to turn to, and he's eventually rescued by a street cleaner who sees him, rescues him from one of the marauding gangs, and decides to take him under her wings. But he discovers that she lives, in fact, under a bridge. She does not have a home because she too has been victimized by the system. But out of the meeting of those two unlikely souls, something evolves. And that's what the story is about. And the setting is really homeless people under a bridge and their relationship, although they come from two different worlds. So it's a very interesting. I have seen some of the rehearsals and I quite like it. I think it's going to do well and it's very relatable, particularly now that so many people are homeless after the hurricane.
Oh, yes. And you were working also on hurricane relief
I
earlier.
yes, yes, I did my little part. We collected water to send out to the people who just never had water at all. And it's because of the hurricane that I really believe and understand the maxim that water is really life, you know. It is. When you're without water, you're almost as good as dead.
Yeah, but you wrote even as you're talking about the play, it even sounds like you didn't write it. I'm guessing that you wrote the
I
play.
wrote all of it. Yes,
Yes.
I wrote all of it. I wonder myself, sometimes you realize that as a writer, you're just a vehicle through which maybe a window or so from the universe opens and the message is sent through you, but it's maybe even bigger than you sometimes.
Oh, I like that. I want to stop on that. Oops,
Wonderful.
sorry. That was my fault. I opened a window I shouldn't have. So I want to stop on that, that you are, as the playwright, as a writer, do you write other things?
No. Mm-mm,
It's
mm-mm.
just as the playwright, as the you are the vehicle for the message. Thank you very much, Basil.
And therefore you must be very mindful of the importance of your role in the society, that you uplift rather than beat down and divide, instead that you unite and you lift up.
I like that. Thank you very much for having this conversation with us.
My
I'm
pleasure
going
to
to
Kelly. It was a
I'm going
pleasure.
to press end stream and see. Thanks.
Thank you. If you need to do this again, let's do it and do it for 1 hour this time.